there have been so many 40 and 60 and 80-year lives, billions of them, and we all have souls, and I feel their collective souls.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you think happens when we die?
I think that the soul lives on because we have created so much energy, and when we display courage and hope, it lives on. But I do believe the body goes back to ash, and it is nevermore.
Forgot to edit that part out. Now, in fairness, I don't think Oprah was really a demeaning atheist. I think she is more of someone who's, at least on an intellectual basis, trying to understand where an atheist is coming from. But I don't consider Naiad, as I said, a true atheist. But what I do find disturbing about Oprah's revelation is that she doesn't even realize it's her opinion is so biased. But, you know, there are hints there that she's breaking up that bias. It seems to her that atheists don't feel that deep emotional connection to the universe unless they see God. I don't agree with that. As a matter of fact, I feel very connected with this world and possibly what's beyond. Okay? I'm not saying that I have closed out the possibility that there's something beyond this life. But I think once we're dead, we're like a computer. We cease to exist. We no longer process data. We no longer breathe. And I certainly don't believe we come back from the dead. Okay? I mean, once we start decomposing, I don't think we become zombies. But that's just that's been based upon my experiences and my observations. So, in fairness, I think Oprah was just trying to comprehend what Naiad was saying, but maybe she needs to devote a show to educating herself and her viewers on the awe-inspiring, wondrous aspects of atheism and secular humanism, and not just coming at it from a point of view of what it's like to be a spiritual or religious person. Because if you're just clinging to your ideologies, you're not really grasping what the other person is saying. And as an atheist, in many ways, I'm forced to live in a world where people say, you don't believe in God, or you don't go to church, or, well, as I said on the program yesterday, going to church doesn't make you a Christian. It just means you went to church. Because otherwise, I would automatically become a Christian the moment I step into a church. No, it doesn't. That comes from within. Okay? Let's see, I want to save that story for another time. I'm not ready to open up that can of worms yet. This is another story, though, but the next one I'm going to talk about is a story I should have brought up yesterday, and I'm ashamed of myself for not doing it. But I admit, my monologue yesterday went pretty long. And remember the Steubenville rape case that attracted national attention last year because of the extraordinary and terrible events in that story? It was about a young girl who was victimized first by her teenage rapist, and then by the town itself where she lived, which went about victim blaming her and rushing to the defense of her attackers, who happened to be athletes for the town's pride and glory, the high school football team. Well, in the months since that case first came to light, national attention has turned to more and more cases like Steubenville's, and case in point, this past weekend, another eerily similar story emerged, this time not too far from Kirksville. As a matter of fact, in northwest Missouri, Maryville, Missouri. Kansas City Star published the story on Sunday during their remarkable 7-month-long investigation into a story that unfolded late last year in Maryville. In this case, though, the rape victim never got to see her horror story go to trial, and the family's terror is far from over. They've even had their house burnt down. 14-year-old Daisy and her 13-year-old friend were both high school freshmen in January of 2012 when they were invited to a house party by a senior star of the Maryville football team. Now, once there, the older girl was given a large glass filled with alcohol and urged by a room full of some of the school's most popular athletes to drink that. She stupidly did, and they handed her a second glass. Well, the following morning, Daisy's mother discovered her daughter alone on her front lawn in sub-freezing temperatures, weeping. She helped Daisy into the bathtub after finding her outside, where she noticed some reddish, irritated marks around her girl's genitalia and buttocks. Daisy's mom also found the 13-year-old friend was upstairs in Daisy's room, also confused. Both girls were taken to an area hospital. On Daisy's body, the doctor found small vaginal tears emblematic of someone who had just had sex. The 13-year-old, who remembered the night's events, told investigators that she was forced to have sex despite saying no over and over and over again. Eyewitnesses who spoke with the star, including Daisy's 13-year-old friend, recall seeing Daisy being carried, crying, by some of the older boys out of the house into a car. It didn't take long for police to round up Barnett and other partiers for questioning. Barnett, a 17-year-old defensive end for the Maryland high school football team, admitted to having sex with Daisy, but said it was consensual. Classic defense. Well, Jordan Zeck, a teammate and standout wrestler for Maryville, admitted to recording some of the encounter on another friend's iPhone. Now, within days, both these young men were arrested in the case. Barnett was facing felony sexual assault charges and one count of endangering the welfare of a child, a misdemeanor. Maybe we ought to raise that up to a felony. Zach was also charged for sexual exploitation of a minor. But like in the Steubenville case before it, the town of Maryville revolted against the facts in the case. Days after the incident became public knowledge, students at the high school began attacking Daisy and her family. What the fuck is wrong with you people? That kind of shit I cannot tolerate, and I'm pardon my language, but it is bullshit. You make the victim out to be the perpetrator of this crime? That is a warped sense of mind. Well, on social media, fellow Maryville students began threatening Daisy, tweeting that she would get what's coming. Daisy's older brother, Charlie, who was himself an athlete from Maryville, was booed by his own classmates during a wrestling meet. Her mother, a veterinarian, was fired from her job 2 weeks after the incident without so much as an explanation, only later learning that her boss feared that her presence was putting stress on her other employees. Meanwhile, members of the community rallied behind Barnett and the other perpetrators. In March, just over 2 months after the alleged rape took place, I don't think there's anything alleged about it, the most serious charges of sexual assault and sexual exploitation of a minor was dropped without explanation. Again, what the hell's going on? Good old boy network at play here. Well, Daisy's family moved away to avoid the threats and harassment they faced since the story first came to light. But the trouble didn't end. 6 months ago, their old house burned down mysteriously. If the story sounds all familiar, it's because it almost mirrors the case in Steubenville, Ohio. Like Steubenville, the perpetrators were members of the high school's immensely successful football team. Like Steubenville, the town of Maryville rallied behind the alleged rapist and ostracized the victim. And like Steubenville, the events in Maryville are quickly becoming a national story. Now, in some ways, though, the Maryville case is actually worse. For example, Barnett, aside from being a celebrated athlete, also happens to be the grandson of a prominent Missouri State senator. Well, isn't that fucking convenient? Less than a week before the charges against Burnett and Zach were dropped, Daisy's mother got a phone call from a friend who warned that favors were being called in and that the charges would be dropped. You know, I'm willing to bet this Burnett had some priors, and they probably got expunged because he's a minor, even unless he was charged as an adult, which doesn't seem very likely. Well, the Nottoway County prosecutor, Robert Rice, who was responsible for the case against Barnett and Zach, also has political ties to Rex Barnett, the grandfather of Matt Barnett. Now, when the mother of the victim sought an explanation from Rice as to why he dropped the charges against both boys, he ignored her phone calls. Well, the Star finally tracked down Rice months later and asked the same question, and in his office, when a picture of Rex Barnett hangs, or rather where a picture of Rex Barnett hangs, he told the paper simply that it was due to a lack of evidence. Really? Lack of evidence? Well, he went on to dismiss the events of that night as the act of incorrigible teenagers. Perhaps. But you know what? It does not justify it, and it does not excuse it. Those young men should be and must be held accountable for their actions. And I hope to God they are. The video that Zek admitted to filming on an iPhone has never surfaced. Not even to police. You know what? I bet it mysteriously was deleted. And Missouri state law dictates that in cases where the charges are dropped, all of the records pertaining to the case, that includes interviews with eyewitnesses, tests done on bed sheets, the results of rape kits, are sealed. Even if Maryville didn't learn anything from the Steubenville case, the media now has a chance to show that they have. As rape cases have emerged in the national spotlight, news outlets from ABC News to Yahoo have been quick to portray the accused rapists as the real victims, denied of promising futures or an opportunity to play in a few high school football games. Well, I admit the rapists are victims. Victims of their own stupidity, arrogance, and power. Rape is not about sex. It's about power and domination. And these boys knew that they couldn't get these girls any other way. So the only way they knew how to do it was to drug them, humiliate them, and then drag their name through the mud later on. I just don't understand that rationale, or how a community can turn against the victims and say that they were the reasons for this happening in the first place. This kind of shit has to stop, and it has to stop right now. And if I may be so bold, and this is probably going to irritate a lot of Christians, but I want you to think about this. And this is one of the main reasons why I don't buy into the supernatural part of Christianity. It's the whole Immaculate Conception thing. That is rape. You could call it a miracle all you want. But God violated Mary's personal and private space. And if Mary is the daughter of God, wouldn't that be incest? And even if she's not a child of God, a God or a deity, even doing this, that is rape. Period. I can't justify that. I can't. I will not. If that offends you, well, then I think you have to work this out. But to me, that was rape. And to me, it doesn't excuse God for what was done. Whether it really happened or not, just to even write that came from a very, very sick mind. And it has been perpetuated for 2,000 years as truth. Okay. One more story that I wanted to bring up on the program today. And I just learned about this a couple hours ago from CBS News. The U.S. Supreme Court takes up the issue of affirmative action today. But this time the question is not whether race may be considered as a factor in college admissions. This may surprise a lot of my conservative friends and cohorts, but I am opposed to affirmative action. And I'll explain why in a moment. Well, this case instead tests whether voters can ban affirmative action programs through a referendum. 10 years ago, the High Court upheld the University of Michigan Law School's affirmative action policy. The day after that ruling, opponents of affirmative action launched a referendum campaign to